Here's something most people outside of the professional audio industry don't really think about. Your wireless microphone doesn't own its frequency. Nobody does. The RF spectrum is a shared public resource regulated by the government, the FCC in the United States. And for most of history, professional wireless audio systems lived alongside UHF television broadcasts, specifically in the gaps between local TV broadcasts called TV white space. It was a smart arrangement. TV stations broadcast on specific channels, and wireless mics quietly used the empty space in between. But then the smartphone revolution happened and everything changed. By the late 2000s and early 2010s, mobile data demand was exploding. Carriers needed more spectrum to build out 4G and eventually 5G networks. And the FCC looked at the UHF television band, all of that beautifully efficient low-frequency spectrum that travels long distances and penetrates walls easily, and decided some of it needed to be reallocated. The result was a series of spectrum auctions that fundamentally reshaped the landscape for wireless audio users. The FCC had already auctioned off the 700 megahertz band in 2008, clearing the 698 to 806 megahertz range and forcing anyone operating there to find new frequencies by 2010. That was an early and uncomfortable warning that the spectrum wireless mics relied on was not guaranteed. But the one that really shook the industry was the FCC's incentive auction completed in April 2017. The FCC auctioned off spectrum from TV channels 38 through 51 to wireless carriers, a massive slice of the UHF band, specifically the 614 to 698 megahertz range. As of July 13th, 2020, any system operating in the 617 to 652 megahertz or 663 to 698 megahertz range was illegal to use in the United States. Let that sink in for a second. If you'd invested in a quality wireless system that operated in that range, and plenty of houses of worship, schools, theaters, and working musicians had, that gear was now a liability. Not just obsolete, illegal to operate. There were rebate programs from some manufacturers to soften the blow, but the fundamental reality was hard. A lot of people had to replace perfectly functional equipment because the regulatory ground shifted underneath them. And here's what made it even more complicated. The TV repack that followed the auction crowded the remaining spectrum. TV stations that had been operating on channels 38 and above had to move lower in the band. So now you had more TV stations sharing the space that wireless microphones still had access to, making frequency coordination more challenging even for users who were not directly affected by the 600 megahertz cutoff. The industry's response was to build in flexibility. If the spectrum is going to be contested and unpredictable, the smart play is to design systems with the widest possible tuning range, so that even when regulators redraw the lines again, users still have room to maneuver. Instead of a system locked to a narrow slice of band, you design a system that can tune across a much wider range, giving you far more options for finding clean, legal frequencies wherever you are. This thinking showed up first in high-end professional systems. When Shure launched Axient Digital in 2017, it included a tuning range of up to 184 megahertz, a deliberate response to the spectrum instability that the 600 megahertz auction had made impossible to ignore. The SLXD line eventually received expanded tuning as well, but for years, that flexibility stayed at the very top of the market. The more affordable SLXD, launched in 2020, still operated on narrow regional bands, up to 44 megahertz, leaving users with less room to maneuver. Today, that's one thing that the SLXD Plus addresses at this price tier. Its 138 megahertz tuning range in the North American band isn't a coincidence. It's a direct response to a decade of spectrum instability, and it's bridging a capability that pros have relied on for years down to a much wider audience. One important note, though, SLXD Plus units are still region-specific. You can't buy one system and take it everywhere in the world. The G57 band, covering North America and Latin America, is a different SKU from the G65 band covering Europe, which is different again from the bands sold in Australia, Japan, Southeast Asia, and so on. Each region has its own frequency allocations, and the hardware reflects that. What the wider tuning range does solve is the number of units that are needed within a region. In North America, the old SLXD required 3 separate band SKUs, G58, H55, and J52, to cover the same territory that a single G57 unit can cover now. So instead of managing 3 different bands of gear that only work in certain parts of the country, you stock 1. And for touring engineers and rental companies, that's a significant improvement, even if it doesn't make your gear work everywhere on every continent.